So here we already have the answers. We just want the another table that we're going to call answered tests. I don't know if that's the correct thing, word to use or name. That's entirely up to you. Put something that makes more sense to you. So we will need an ID and several other columns. So let's just add a few more. I'm going to call this one answered tests. Okay, so I have written a few items here that I need to make sure. So first of all, we need to know who the user ID is that answered that test, and we need to know the test ID itself as well. That way we can identify it. And I could have added the whoever created the test here, the teacher, for example, but that would be repeating data that already exists in another table, so no need. So I need to know whether this has been submitted or not, and I need to know when it was submitted, because sometimes that submission date is important if there's a deadline. And then marked, I need to know if this is marked already or not, and who marked it and when they marked it. Okay, and then we can add final date. Now this date is just to display when this entry was created, and usually that represents when the student started taking the test. Okay, so yeah, that should work. We can add a few more columns as we need more information from this, but otherwise let's put our types here. So there's date, time for dates, so all the dates should go to date time, of course. So where are we? Date time, marked by. This one is a user ID, which will allocate 60 characters as variable character because we use the user ID. And marked is just a boolean, yes or no, with a value of 1, because we just have a 0 or a 1. We can put a 2, a 3, and a 4 because it's still one character, but we'll just use it for 1 and 0 to avoid confusion. We could use submitted and marked in one column, where we say 0 is not submitted, 1 is submitted, 2 is marked, 3 is something else. But that makes things a little bit complex for future use when you are going through your table to see what's going on. So I would rather we separate these as they are. So tiny int 1 as well. Submitted date, of course, is going to be a date time. And this one, variable character as well. Since these are both user IDs, let's allocate 60 because that's how far a user ID can go. And ID, you can put ID or big, you can put int or big int. Really doesn't matter because either is good enough. And what do I need? Let me zoom out a little bit. I need auto increment and primary key for the ID, and that should do it. So let's hit save like so. Alrighty then, so nice. And of course we'll need indices for every one of these user IDs and test IDs. Let's go test ID index, boom, boom, boom. And submitted, yes, we'll need an index because we want to learn, we may want to retrieve all those submitted only, those that are not submitted or those that were submitted. So marked, even those that were marked, maybe marked by, we will need to know which teacher marked what. So maybe not the date. If you want to be searching by date, you can add an index there as well. Same thing here, we may order by the date or by the ID. Anyway, just go crazy and add indices there. Just remember that every index you add adds to the size of the database. So just put where you need them, but space usually isn't an issue as much as the speed of reading the data. So that's why we add all these indices. Okay, so at this point, this is all good, but how then does it work? Let's go to browse. So every time we save some answers, we have to check if the anchor exists here. If this row that represents those questions or those answers already exist. If it doesn't, we add it. If it does, we ignore it. So in this case, we already have some answers, but we don't have an anchor to these answers in here. So we will need to add that anchor there. So let's see if we can do a quick job here and see what if we have enough of these things here to create a record. So obviously this will go in the tech tests as the user takes the test, and this is where things go if we submit. So right in here is where we will need to deal with all this. Now I want us to, let's see here first, check if answer already exists. Okay, so there's a loop here for each loop that goes on, and all these things are created, but things like user ID we can create without going through here, and test ID, because those are the things that we really need. This is what really identifies this row, both of these. If a particular user has taken a specific test, then that's good enough. We don't need to learn any more about it. That should be enough. So what I will do is go here. So right here, let's create another array. Now I'm just going to call this one ARR2, just to change it from the other one. So this one will have, let me just copy user ID here, paste it there, and let's copy also test ID and paste it there. Let's copy date as well and paste it there. Okay, so we have a few of these sorted, but just don't forget to change this to, actually I don't even need to change this to anything else, because before I get down there it will only have these three that I need, so I can use it before I add more down here. So maybe I'll leave it like that. Yeah, the only problem is I have to add all these thingies here, which may interfere with what I already have here. So yeah, so maybe let's add a 1 there just to keep it clean. Okay, so once we have that, let's give a test to see if we can find a record that has all that. Now this is answered tests. I don't have a model for answered tests yet. However, I can still use any model to read from that particular table if I use the query function. Or one thing I don't mention enough is that you can use the, let's go to core here. You can use the database class directly, because if I create a new instance of database, it still has query there, okay, which we can use to run queries. So let's try and use that as well instead. So let's just say db is equal to new database with a capital database like that. Okay, so that should give us a query, something to use to query. So here I'll say check. This is for checking, just like we did there. Check is equal to db query, like so. And then let's run a query in there. So in here, what I want is to select, let's see, I just want an ID, right? From answered tests, where the user ID is equal to user ID and test ID is equal to, of course, test ID. So we just want 1, so let's just limit 1 so we don't waste the time of yeah. So here we have, so let's ignore this one for now. Let me move this a little bit lower, up to there, so that it's not available. We just have these two babies, and I can add this directly in here. So comma, there we go. Good. Okay, so if this is successful, if we find something here, then we're going to ignore it. But if we don't, then we insert an entry. So I will say if not check like this, then we're in business. Okay, like that. I don't know why I added this here. Then we move this in here as well. So if not check, if it's there, ignore. If not, then we have to run an insert. Now to run an insert, we may need the query itself, the model, but since we don't have the model, let's try and do it with the DB directly. So I'll just create a query here. Let's just say query is equal to, and let's say insert into answered tests. Okay, answered tests, and then let's do that. Let's put values like that. That's how you insert. Okay, so I'll use that dummy for now. Let me move this upward because I'll need that date before we go any further. And then down here, I'm going to need to run that query. So I'll say db query, and then put that query there, and then put, of course, the AAR1, which will contain all the values that I need. Okay, so this is all good, but let's add more content here. What do we need? Now, if looking at this, there will be parts that may be empty once we insert the first initial record. So let's go to structure and look at those guys. So definitely we'll need the user ID and test ID to be present when we create a row. But we may not need, let's see here, submitted. We may not need submitted date, marked, that, but this one will be available. So let's change all these, otherwise it will fail to register. So let's put default values for these. In case we don't have values, let's put some defaults. And marked should be 0 because it's not marked. Just like submitted should be 0 because it's, not this one, sorry. None here. Here we'll put a no as the default, and just like this one, no. Marked by, let's put no as well. And where is this? Marked itself, we can put 0, and submitted we can put 0 to say it's not been submitted, it's not been marked, etc. And let's see. Okay, so at least we have default values for when we don't have values for those. That way we can only concentrate on user ID, test ID, and date when initially saving this. Okay, cool. So with that information, it means we have enough here, and all I need to do now is to account for these guys. So I'll say user ID, test ID, and date, like so. And then I will copy exactly this and paste it right here, and then just put full colons here since we are using prepared statements, like so. Okay, so this should work as it is. Now we already have a test where this guy is answering, so let's go back, log out and log in as guy@yahoo.com, and let's go to password. There we go. And if I go to tests now, there is a test I've already started taking, so let me just go there. And so as you can see here, we don't have a record yet, but once I answer something, we should have a record. So let me go to page 2, and let's see, here's another question. Okay, let's just say here is another answer, and let's save those answers. So any answers that are saved should create a record here, because it doesn't exist. So you see, we have a record there. So let's just make sure it's not malfunctioning by adding another answer. Let me just say 2-point answer here and save. Let's make sure we are not getting 2 or 3 more records here or anything changing. So let me refresh, and nothing has changed. So this is all good. Things are working as planned. We have an anchor now for all our answers. Okay, so let's see what we can do with that in the next video.